Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We are just going to give everybody another minute to arrive from busy lives. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight. I'm actually going to go ahead and pin our speakers. Actually, no, I'm going to spotlight you. That's what I'm going to do. There we go. Um, And yeah, I think we're just gonna go ahead and get started and let the latecomers come in as I'm doing my jibber jabber before the important program begins. My name is Jacqueline Friedman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the founder and executive director of Educate Us, and I'm super excited to welcome you here tonight for this incredibly important conversation about overcoming misogynoir and what it takes to get Black women elected for real. We are recording, as everybody knows, when they entered the Zoom. If that means you want to change your name on the Zoom or it affects you in any way, just take that into account. We will be posting this recording to our YouTube channel and using clips from it so that more and more people can be exposed to the conversation. Um, Before we get into it, I just also wanted to say that our thoughts are with Florida right now. I think that's on everybody's mind and on ours as well. So I just wanted to call into the room and put our prayers and thoughts out for everyone facing the hurricane. I wanted to share just very briefly about Educate Us and then set some rules of the road and turn it over to our incredible presenters. Educate Us is a nonprofit advocacy organization building a movement for public school sex education around the country. We work with school board candidates to help them get elected so that they can make better sex ed policy. We do community organizing. We help individual folks like you get connected to build better sex education around the country. Why are we talking about misogynoir? Well, you'll hear more about that in the conversation. But one thing that I want to just say to frame the conversation is, and actually a session we had earlier this summer is that Project 2025 calls to ban sex ed altogether. So the stakes for sex ed in this election are total. And that's just at the top of the ticket, and there's stakes all the way down to the school board level. So we will be getting into it. Okay, just some really, really basic rules of the road. Um, don't be hateful. I am going to be your bouncer tonight. If you say stuff that's out of bounds, you will get one warning if there's plausible deniability and no warnings if there's no plausible deniability. And I am the judge and executioner, so just don't pull anything and we'll be good. Um, we have no tolerance for that here tonight. Um, we are going to take questions at the end. We're going to try and leave at least 20 minutes for your questions. Be thinking of them as you go. And if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. That's how we're going to handle questions tonight. Either Jamila and Candace, as they go, can pull them up, or at the end, we'll hold them for the Q&A, and I'll read them to the two presenters. So don't feel like you have to hold on to them in your brain. Go ahead and put the questions in the chat as you go. Just make sure they're fairly concise and actually in the form of a question. Um, I think that is all I was gonna say. Yeah. So we're gonna have a conversation, and then you're gonna get some takeaways about what you can do. So when you're hearing the depressing parts of this conversation, don't despair. There's gonna be actual action items for you tonight that you can do before November 5th. And then we're gonna get into it with all y'all. And with that, I just want to introduce our incredible panelists tonight. We have with us Candace Hardnett, who is our lead organizer here at Educate Us. We love her. She works with so many of the folks on the ground and our school board candidate. She is a longtime organizer and for lots of causes, including LGBTQ rights, and is a pastor and is also on social media as at Godly and Gay. And is just fantastic follow, if I may say so. And also joining her is my very dear friend, Jamil Smith, who I've known for ages, who is the editor-in-chief of the editor-in-chief of the Emancipator, which is an anti-racist news outlet doing just incredible work. You should also give them a follow. and get on their newsletter and mailing lists. Really useful, excellent content at all times. I'm sure Jamil can put links in the chat. And he's a longtime journalist and media producer, and is going to be bringing some of that perspective into the conversation tonight as well. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to the two of you. Take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Hello to everyone here. We're very excited to have you, Jamil. And thank you for putting the link to the Emancipator into the chat. Tonight, we're going to be talking about, and many of you may already be familiar with the term, some of you may not, misogynoir. And we're going to kind of give you a little background of what that is and expose what you should be looking for when it comes to this issue. And so I think if you're here, you probably read exactly what it is in the actual invite. But we're talking about the intersection of racism and sexism as it relates to Black women, right? So thank you so much for being here for this conversation, Jamil. I would love to hear your experiences as well, as a Black man, and I'll share mine as a Black woman of where this is showing up for us just in general life, and if we can talk about it a little bit.
Well, thank you very much again, Candace and Jacqueline, for having me. And first things first, I mean, I was part of the newsroom. Anyone remember the Nerdland newsroom back at MSNBC? Jacqueline, thank you. I was part of what may have been, other than Tamron Hall, I guess the first, newsroom centered around a Black woman host at MSNBC. I worked for Melissa Harris Perry, and we saw, of course, we got deluged with misogynoir, simply for, in a lot of cases, just simply for speaking the truth. And so, I think it speaks to the cowardice of racism and misogyny. Both of them are, social afflictions, but I definitely look at them as, both cowardly acts. And, certainly, I hear also too, I was reading Moya Bailey, who was, graduate student who came up with the term. She wrote that, misogynoir is that, quote, the hate speech and negative media representations that malign Black women and people who read as Black women. Now, of course, we need to make sure that we include that last part, because I feel that so many folks want to say, yeah, I stand for Black women, and then they're not standing for Black trans women. They're not standing for Black gay women. They're not standing for Black women of various different identities in all shapes and sizes. And, at the end of the day, if you can't stand for all of them, then, are you actually standing for any of them?
That's right. I mean, I think that is such an important point because people love to exclude those individuals within a community that don't fit whatever their model is. And our Black trans women especially are so disenfranchised. I mean, just constantly. And so, yes, thank you for raising that point. I know for myself, as a Black woman, being in this body, in this skin, walking around in this world. And when I say this world, my world is the South. My world is Savannah, Georgia. There is a constant, I will say, disbelief that I am educated, that I am responsible, that I am capable. And it shows up in the way that people talk to me. It shows up in the way that people interact with me. And especially when I am interacting in a way that's professional, or I'm walking into a professional environment. Have you seen and experienced this as well as, even I know you have, but can we talk about it?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a given. Unfortunately, I mean, I've been in media in one form or another since the late '90s, and so I've definitely seen it happen. But mostly, I've seen it happen to my colleagues, my female colleagues, People who are on my level, above me, and below me. And it comes in various different forms. And one of the forms, I mean, I certainly recognize it also, I should add, my late mother was a professor. And so I've seen it, how that operates within an academic space. And really, I'd say the most common theme I see with misogynoir is not necessarily just straight up like slurring. You think of misogynoir as this, you know, frankly, violent act. It's violent speech. It's violent ignorance or ignorance made violence. But often, sometimes I think sometimes it's just apathy as well. The lack of expectation that some folks have for Black women. People are surprised that Kamala Harris, of all people, this trained attorney who has tried like innumerable cases and has been the district, the attorney general of California, district attorney in San Francisco, a U.S. senator. They're amazed that she can put two words together, and or they compliment her, on that, and or they hold her to different standards. Conversely, let's take the flip side of that and say, hey, why isn't she, elucidating her policies? Like why is the thing that kills me the most right now as we bring the election into the conversation is how folks continue, or months into the Harris campaign, continue to say, well, I don't know her, I don't trust her. And you can not trust Kamala Harris for her policy. Say, hey, I don't like her policy on this. I don't like her policy on that. I don't like her record on this. But if you're saying I'm coming from a place of ignorance and I just don't trust her, then what does that say actually about you more than it says about her?
Right. Exactly. And that in lies exactly what we're talking about, this innate distrust. And let's just be frank about it. When I think about these things, I think about the fact that, is it really a distrust? Because
Mm.
at some point in history, we as Black women were in charge of raising white children. My grandmother raised white children. And so you can't I know I'm a mother. I don't let my child be with but certain folks. You can't distrust us that much. So I wonder if that's the cover, what really is underlying this?
Well, it's like to what degree are you willing to make someone part of quote unquote your family, as long as they are serving you, as long as they are performing a service for you, whether that service is compensated or not. I mean, listen, let's add another layer to Black women. We're talking about immigrant Black women here. A lot of immigrant Black women, if anyone who's lived in New York for any amount of time, will know that a lot of immigrant Black women are raising white children
Mhm.
every day in the biggest city in the country. So if that's happening in New York, of course it's happening throughout the country. And I'm not saying that necessarily that's even a bad thing. I praise those who work in home care. Certainly, those of us who have family members who have needed that kind of care, whether they be young or old, are grateful for people willing to do that job. But I'm saying that if that's all we expect of Black women, based upon our limited understanding of them, then we have a problem. And it's clear from some of the comments that are being made, even about Kamala Harris, that there is just a lack of understanding of what Black women do, who they are, what they experience, and what the obstacles that are in their path.
Absolutely. I saw one man go as far on I think it was a TikTok video, to say that he would Black man, prefer that slavery be reinstated before he would vote for a Black woman. And my mind
That's when
blew.
I get upset.
Yeah,
So this is
like,
not me thinking that's funny.
right. To the
Mm.
point where my mother used to say the phrase of, you cut off your nose to spite your face. You were that angry, incensed, distrusting, whatever, that you would prefer to be subjugated in a than to vote and to
Yeah.
allow a Black woman to be in charge. That in itself, I think, it's misinformed, even within our community.
I mean, first things first. I mean, I doubt someone who would say such a thing it knows the first thing about enslavement, or what people who were enslaved endured, survived, and died doing, or were murdered doing. I just frankly, that kind of opinion, it's toxic because it's easy to see a certain logic in it if, in fact, you already bought into misogyny. Now, the racism of that statement, the racist, like, I'm going to enable one of the worst acts of racism ever perpetrated on a people. I want to reinvigorate that. I want to reintroduce that rather than giving Black women their due, or accepting like you said, a subordinate, not even subjugated, just a subordinate position to Black women. Like, there's a lot of brothers, I can't tell you how many times I have a lot of, female friends, and they tell me all the time that they can't find somebody because the guy's not willing to date a woman who makes more money than he does, who has more degrees than he does, has a better house or a better car than he does. It's 2024 and we're still here. We're still in high school. What is going on? And so that is what I think why we need to have conversations like this. We need to be talking about what misogynoir is out there, how it shows up in this election cycle and in any other, and what we need to be doing in order to address it. That, to me, I think is the key thing that we need to accomplish tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, of course, that we're thinking about is the Kamala Harris is not Black stuff.
Yes.
Now, people might be like, well, how's that misogynoir? When I was in the room when Trump said that. I was in the room in Chicago at the NABJ convention, 8 rows from the front, when he's talking about how he's heard that she just chose to be Black. It's barely worth dignifying. But the point is, the fact that he felt comfortable in a room full of arguably the best Black journalists in the world were in that room, one room together. Mm-hmm. And, he felt comfortable enough to say, you know what? I don't even know if she's Black. It just, we have become, just our existence alone has become something for them to troll, for them to ridicule, for them to stick us with cattle prods. And if that doesn't remind some folks of it's a conjure certain images, the fact that they're doing this rhetorically doesn't make it any less harmful. And if we are, it's the kind of rhetoric that keeps, in my opinion, I think keeps a lot of women from even entertaining the thought of running for office. Why would I go and have to deal with all of that? Why would I want to have to subject myself to ignoramuses and cretins like Donald Trump? I don't know. Like, I can imagine that is discouraging for a lot of women who run for office. And I know that, Rutgers has, done some really interesting studies on this. And I think we can put the link in the chat for folks who want to get more information. But I mean, we've got, how many hundreds of, how many decades we've had, just thinking about, like, whether or not we're going to even have a Black woman governor, or we're going to have a Black woman, in any kind of leadership position. Forget about presidency for the moment. Like, right. We might have a Black woman in the White House before we ever have a Black woman governor.
That's right.
Exactly. Thank you, Jack. Like, in the idea that, we have one Black woman in the Senate, one, only 28 in the House. And we know how many people are in the House. 57 in the history of this country, 57 Black women.
It's insane.
In the Congress, both houses. So that, to me, tells me that this is a republic that is only comfortable still. I think it's a big reason Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. Still, after 8 years of Barack Obama, only comfortable with leadership looking a certain way. And, like, if Donald Trump thinks birtherism 2.0 is going to work on Kamala Harris, like, at this point, he's hitting a spot that's dead. He's like picking at a keloid at this point. Like, that spot is healed over. Like we're not even, we can't even, we don't even have time for that. What we are now focused on, I think to our credit, is less what people say and more about the outcomes they're going to generate. So if we are upset by, you know, the distraction, I mean, Toni Morrison told us what racism's true purpose really is. It's to distract us and it's to tire us out.
That's
And
right.
you know, if we can just roll our eyes and get tired when people like Trump start to, you know, throw a mess like that out, or you know, we can try our best to help our fellow citizens think more critically about what's going on.
That's right. Because when we fight, we win. And I think that's really, kind of the purpose of tonight, to even expose what we're seeing and educate us. We work a lot with school board candidates, and you hit the nail right on the head, talking about, the fact that we've never even seen a Black governor in the all of the United States. I worked on the Stacey Abrams campaign, and, we were very excited about the fact that this will be the first Black governor in the entire United States, and we saw that that didn't happen. And I work on school board races now. And what we're finding is that a lot of African American, a lot of Black women don't run for school board.
Yeah.
We're not, we're finding women. There are a lot of women that I work with, very few Black women. And when we find Black women running, a lot of times they're in places where there's a majority there's a pretty big Black population, because they know that, or they feel, I can't say they know, but they're feeling more comfortable that someone will vote for them, because historically we've seen that other people are not voting for Black women in the same way that they will even vote for a white woman, and certainly, like you just exposed, a white man. And so, we're here to talk about how we fight that and how we can combat that. And I
Mm-hmm.
know we can't solve it all by November 5th, but there are some things, that we can start to implement and express now, and hopefully build a movement where this is a conversation starter, where we can then go out and build upon it, so that moving forward things can look bit different and better.
I mean, I always think about what Dr. King said in the mountaintop speech, in the address that he made. It's like, I may not get there with you. This is a
Right.
battle that we may not finish before we are dead. And they may not be finished by the time our children have passed on. Um, it took, think about how long it is taken to have racism fully ingrained within so many different structures of our society. Think about how long it's taken for, you know, misogyny to feel at home here in America. And when you
Hmm.
combine those forces, you know, you got a Voltron of hatred. You
Yeah.
got this, and that's going to be difficult to defeat with a campaign, with a, with whether it be a presidential campaign or an activist campaign. But that does not mean that we can't chip away at the base. We can't
Right.
make it easier for the next generation to fight these battles. And frankly, I think we need to make sure that our scope is generational. We cannot simply, because if we are ignoring, first of all, the lessons of past generations who have fought
Right.
through arguably much more difficult and violent and fraught times than we did, and we have had to get us to the point where we are still feeling oppressed, still feeling tired out by racism and misogyny, still feeling the way we do about it, but still have more of an opportunity to make a difference, to chip away. We have a larger hammer in our hands to chip away at this thing. And we want to keep building and make sure we have more people chipping away with even larger hammers. I hate to keep
That's
using
right.
the metaphor, but we have to make sure that we keep at the end of the day, an optimistic note in this fight. Because if we don't stay in the fight, they're more than happy to say, "Hey, great," you know, let's put it this way: like if we don't show up, if we don't been on the field, they're more than happy to take a forfeit. They don't
That's
care.
right.
They're not about defeating us. They're about making sure that they get their way.
Yep.
So,
That they
however
get
that has to happen, they're fine with it. And unfortunately, I think our side is more reliant upon aspects of the system we need to deconstruct. We still need aspects of that system to be working for people who are less fortunate and who need benefits of that system. So that's a tough nut for us to crack. I think, as we, whether we're journalists, whether we're politicians, whether we're people in the business world, that's a tough nut for us to crack, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Oh yeah, and we must try. One of the things that I think we're missing, we see a lot of issue, right? When
Mhm.
we don't have all aspects at the table, we don't solve issues as quickly and as effectively and efficiently as we could. I say this all the time. Utilizing, even things like cancer. How do we know that the cure for cancer wasn't in the body of one of, the mind and the ability of one of the people that they enslaved? Like when we hold people back, we essentially hold ourselves back as a people, as a humanity. And so it's important, it's vital that we help not just certain people win, but all people. And right now, as we're focusing on Black women, because that's the demographic that we're seeing just completely overlooked, not, just not even the thought of running is so scary for many.
Mhm.
We gotta push everyone up. What are some of the things that we can start doing? I know I have my ideas, but I know people listening tonight want to know, well, what can I do? I'm sure by now, what can I do in my life, in my community, in my state? What are some of the action items that they can take away tonight and start implementing to make a difference?
Tomorrow, you can start diversifying your media diet. That's something you can start to do tomorrow morning. Start reading feminist outlets. Find them. If you don't know what they're called, find them. We have access, we have more access, arguably, to information than any other time in human history. And folks are still like, I can't find your website. Like, I trust folks to be resourceful. I trust folks to be in a mode where they are curious, not simply standing by and letting things, be soaked in information. We could sit and just watch MSNBC every day, and I'm sure we'd actually get a lot of useful information. But the key is to read a lot of diverse media sources, people who are saying things that you can't say on TV. And that doesn't mean simply finding new websites to read. It also means finding new books to read. Folks have this stuff is out there. I mean, we could spend the rest of the talk giving you recommendations of what to read and what to watch and what to listen to. But I also trust folks who are out here to find these things for themselves. And I say this specifically to my fellow Black men. All right. I can't tell you how many barbershops I've been in where I've told them about websites like Feministing, Jezebel, and like, oh, it's not like this, guys. This is not some romantic comedy that you like. Oh, okay, that's a girls' movie. I didn't even watch that. Like you may think that, but like, guys, you can go to the website that's run by a lot of women, and you'll learn something. You'll learn things. You don't just go on the internet to just be spoon fed everything that you already believe. To me, it's a place where you can go and explore and find perspectives that you may agree with, that you may not agree with, that you at least gather more information. To me, I don't know. It's one of the greatest and most terrible resources we've ever created, and I think that it's something that we can be using to our advantage. Um, I think Black men, are stuck in a lot of ways. A lot of Black men are stuck in a mindset that, I can't vote for a Black woman, even if like, even beyond the like I want slavery back guy. Like that was an extreme example. But there are men who are going to step into the voting booth, who are going to tell everybody that they're voting for Harris, and then they feel like they just can't do it because of why. And I want those men to ask themselves why. Why can't you do it? Why can't you pull that lever for her? It's not merely about her. I'm not here trying to do a commercial for Kamala Harris. What I'm trying to do is say, listen, like the alternative here is, in a lot of, not to be too extreme, alarmist about it, but potentially the end of the American experiment. And the end of the American experiment, the rubble, the most of the rubble is going to fall on people who look like us when everything is crumbling down. So let's be real. Like it's we don't have a choice here. We must elect her. Period. We have to vote, as I put it in a recent column of mine. We have to vote. Black folks have been voting on defense for generations now. We're not. We don't have to fall in love with our candidate. We don't have to, sit wrapped in attention at every word.
Right.
Disagree with our candidates. We should be disagreeing with our candidates. We can push them to be better. That's the whole point. You elect them and then you keep pushing them. You don't just say, well, they have one policy I don't agree with, and I'm just going to be like, well, I'm going to vote for the other guy or not show up. And then you think that that's someone who thinks the election is all about them and their choice. When actually the exact opposite is true. Voting is arguably the most altruistic thing we can be doing as citizens. We should be thinking about not ourselves, not like our one issue that really matters to us, but we should be thinking about, hey, who's the best person for everybody?
Right. The country as a whole, who's
Right.
going to bring us together versus divide us.
And if you think that person can't come in the form of someone who doesn't have a penis, then I'm sorry. Like, that's on you.
Right.
That's on you.
Major problem. And there are other demographics. I want to just call out the fact that, we've been talking a lot about Black men. We've been talking about, that dynamic quite a little bit, but this is showing up in all places. This is even showing up amongst Black women. This is showing up amongst white women. We saw even just misogyny show up when in the last election, when women would not vote for Hillary, and will these women vote for Kamala? That's the question. What's going to be different, and how can we start to kind of change that conversation so that there can be a difference?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure what all we need to do is point between 2016 and 2020. Okay. You couldn't find it within yourself to vote for a woman then. So you saw what happened. You saw the deliberate, erosion of women's rights by a president who said that's exactly what he was planning to do. And because you can't bring yourself to make that choice, I think that though the 4 years alone, like we discussed the pandemic and how what effects that had on women and their children, we've not even talked about that. And we can still say, we can point to those 4 years and say, that's your object lesson. We've already observed what happens when we distrust female leadership for reasons that aren't substantial. Now, listen, I'm not a Hillary Clinton fan, Hillary Clinton fan in some respects. I think that there are positive things about her. I think there are a lot of negative things about her. I have profiled Kamala Harris. I did that for Rolling Stone 5 years ago. I definitely think that there are issues that I still have disagreement with her about. But that's okay. That's what this is supposed to be about. And what we're not supposed to do is resort to ignorant evaluations of people based in prejudice, based in faulty information, based in disinformation about people that enables our worst versions of ourselves to go into a voting booth and say, I can't vote for that person.
Right.
Because of who she is, because of how she was born, because of who she loves, all the different things that people use as excuses to make really terrible choices.
Absolutely. So what are as far as the people in the room tonight, one of the things I was thinking about was the fact that so often I believe I don't want to say miss an opportunity, but I think we've played nice for too long, in the sense that when we see things that are unsettling to us, we play nice to the people that have said them. We don't address it head on. And when I'm saying we, I'm just saying generally, usually, that I've seen address it head on. We will run back to our little friend group and complain about it and say, look what I saw. But we won't actually confront. We're afraid of, it seems, of confrontation with people that we perceive to be knowledgeable. I'm talking more so like journalists and people that maybe write things and that sort of thing. And it's like we don't want to challenge them. And my thing is, we have those days are over. We have less than 30 days for this election to happen. I think some of the things that we can do is to, if we're utilizing social media, to utilize it as a tool to expose the false narratives that are being spewed, especially when they're coming from certain news outlets and journalists. And when we do that, I believe, because it just doesn't seem that it's being done on a large scale. If we do that on a larger scale, at every junction, at some point, someone's going to see it, someone's going to understand, someone's going to listen. If every time someone says, well, Kamala Harris isn't Black, there's someone there to challenge that, and to redirect that conversation to truth. Every time it shows up that a woman can't, I, like we mentioned earlier, I'm a pastor, and this shows up in churches constantly, where there are literal doctrines that have been written, not based on anything other than the fact that, like you said, someone can't be in leadership unless there's a penis involved. And so nothing, doctrine that has been written that will exclude women. And the saddest parts are that women sit there and listen to it. I would want that at this point in time, 2024, as we are on the brink of possibly electing our first woman president, let alone African American woman president, for us to do things such as get up out of those types of churches, those types of groups, challenge that stuff, and publicly say, I'm leaving this institution because this is what I see. This is what's been happening. This is not right. Versus to quietly do it. I'll leave out the back and no one knows why I did that. Expose it.
Yeah, what I let things first, like we should recognize and in fairness, the obstacles that these folks may be worried about. Okay, I'm not going to confront my administrator about this misogynoir that I see coming from him or from the organization, because I'm afraid that I can't get another job. I may want to resign in protest, but job market is tough. I got to make sure I can provide for myself, for my family, etc. These are kinds of things that are understandable
Yeah.
concern. But that's also why, there's movement, there's activists, there's organizations out here who can help you. There's legal aid folks who can help you. That just because you can't maybe do some of the gumption to do it yourself does not make you a bad person, does not make you even a fearful person. It makes you somebody who, frankly, has got their priorities in order and is trying to figure a way out of a rock and a hard place. There are people out here who can help you do that. I would say, of course, sticking up for my industry, journalists. If you are facing a situation like that, and you don't see another way out, go to the press. That's worked on a lot of, granted, yes, there's been people who have been burned, but please don't let negative experiences in the past color the rest of us as far as what we may be able to do. We're not out here. I mean, frankly, my publication, the Emancipator, is, frankly, we have a mandate to cover this, not just anti-Black racism, but also racism that is directed at anybody, but also racism as it's combined with other forms of oppression. And and this is not simply intersectionality that we concern ourselves with. It's just about, frankly, being an observer of the world and seeing how these things do combine. It's like, you want to put a term on it, great. I respect the hell out of Kimberly Crenshaw and what she's doing in the world. But these are things that, as she has recognized, were there long before there was a term for it. And if you are having trouble or you see some kind of injustice in the world, there are people who will help you fight it. And, I definitely think that, whether you're as pastor in religious spaces, I imagine there's ways for you to fight it there. I imagine that can be tough. I actually was curious to know more about how, folks who might be going to church regularly, might be going to mass, they may be going to synagogues or wherever they may be worshiping, and they see things happen all the time that are rooted in patriarchy, rooted in racism, and seeing those practices perpetuated without really giving thought to how they may hurt or set people back.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And so my thing, I'm curious in terms of what we should be telling before we get to, questions. And we, of course, want to remind you, please, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Um, what are we telling people they should do? And frankly, does that differ by race? Should we be telling white women to do something? Should we be telling women of color who are not Black to do something different with regards to misogynoir? First things first, I tell people, like, try to understand what you're talking about. Unfortunately, in this country, we're dealing with a learning deficit, and a learning deficit has to do with racism and other forms of oppression. Men are undereducated about what misogyny does to the lives of women and people who identify as women. Similarly, white folks they don't have to grow up necessarily, depending upon where they grow up. They don't necessarily have to understand how to navigate around Black folks, other than maybe like, hey, don't go in that neighborhood. Like, that's the kind of thing that they're taught. I know this because I grew up in a suburb full of white folks, and they were like, oh, I heard that area is like, no, that's actually where my cousin lives. And if you want to go there, we can go there and it'll be fine. Like, and it's about demystifying a lot of those kinds of experiences. And I think, frankly, not enough people take enough initiative on their own to do that for themselves. They depend upon media to do it. They depend upon a TV show to teach them about, drug life in Baltimore, and it's like, great, you watch The Wire. I'm happy for you, but that does not encapsulate Blackness, or it should not encapsulate your understanding of Blackness. It should help you see Black people as three-dimensional people. And I definitely hope that. But if you're watching Scandal and hoping that that's going to help elucidate your knowledge of misogynoir, then I hate to disappoint you. Like, it's just not going to happen. So you're going to have to look into these things for yourself. And if you want more knowledge, you want more understanding, you want to find out how to help, you're going to have to get that knowledge. And I wish we could put together, maybe we could do this later, is put out a reading list, for folks to get started. But, I definitely think that, confronting journalists saying, hey, I have a story for you. I think this is important for you to be talking about. A lot of us are accessible via social media, through our website. You want to write for, you want to get your own voice out there. There's ways to do that. You can pitch the Emancipator. You can pitch any other, you can pitch the New York Times if you want to. Don't think that anything is too big or too small, a venue for your voice. Believe me, people are listening in all kinds of ways and for all kinds of different reasons. So I would say that those are the things that people can do right now. And long term, just increase your understanding about what this kind of behavior looks like and what it actually manifests as. Right. Racism and misogyny, whether they're combined or not, don't necessarily manifest in the form of slurs. They don't manifest in the form of physical violence or rude treatment. They manifest sometimes in most blithe, and sometimes, from a person who's got it wearing a smile on their face, and thinks that they're not doing anything harmful. So I would say just, truly, go to the source, look up Moya Bailey's writings, understand what misogynoir is, and continue learning as you move throughout the society and trying to make change.
Yeah, I would say, and for all of us to do some introspection, to look for it in ourselves. I think one of the things we love to do is to find it on the outside and to pinpoint this person, that person, but rather haven't looked inside to see it in ourselves. Because at the end of the day, if you went through public school in America, or school system, period, there's a bit of this in there. It was taught to you. Now, whether you paid attention, you ingested it, you learned it, and you now practice it, unless you've done something to undo the learning, it's there. And it shows up even for those of us that even are Black women, as we think about and look at I can't tell you, and then we can move into questions, but I can't tell you how many people, Black women in particular, were upset about the person that went to, when Kamala did her first rally in Atlanta, they had a famous, I can't remember the person that performed, but apparently, and she's known for her music and her twerking, and that became a huge issue in the community of how disrespectful, it was. And
I think
these
it was
are
Megan Thee
things,
Stallion.
yeah, Megan Thee Stallion, that's right. Yep. And it's like, we're hating on ourselves at this point, and
I mean, how
it's
far has respectability politics actually gotten us? How far can, it's gotten, I'll tell you how far it's gotten us. It's gotten us here.
mhm,
And it's not where we want to be. We want to be well beyond this. So if we're just relying upon making sure that listen, my mom taught me, she was a grammar teacher. She taught me how to enunciate. My spelling was flawless, but it wasn't about performing a certain kind of, articulate behavior. It wasn't about looking or sounding white or not sounding black. It was about making sure that, hey, people can understand you. And I think we understand Megan Thee Stallion just fine. Like, people understand like what, like I understood the words that were coming out of her mouth.
mhm.
Like just because she's dressed in a certain way, like people think that, and that's another problem I think with voting, around election time, is
Jamil,
that,
I'm going to ask you to wrap it because I really want to get to questions.
oh, I'm going to wrap it then. All
Okay.
right.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
yeah, hey,
also, we're running
we do
short on
that
time,
in we do
and
that in TV a lot. Wrap it.
we do have a question from
Yes.
Emily who asks, I'm a nice white progressive surrounded by nice white progressives who tell me they heard Black people on social media say they can't vote for Kamala because, quote, she's a cop. And so these nice whites say they can't vote for her either in solidarity with Black people. Any ideas to persuade the nice white progressives that Emily is surrounded by?
Candace, I'll defer to
Yeah.
you.
To me, I feel like that's a cop out. That literally, I feel like that's a ploy.
Unintended.
I don't feel like there's anything valid in that argument. As far as we heard from who said that, and I understand that they're, not to discredit, the all cops are bad movie, all of that. I'm not to discredit any of that.
Mm,
Because yes, we can agree, but at the same time, um, we kind of have to weigh, and this is how I look at, like you said earlier, you touched on this. No candidate is going to check every single box and be this perfect person that, you've fallen in love with in whatever form or fashion. Um,
yeah.
and at this point, what is our alternative? Like, at this point, does her profession or chosen profession from, because she's been in politics and a lawyer for quite some time, does that why are we bringing that up? I would hate for someone to be like, back in my early years I was a Marine, and I would hate for someone to be like, well, I can't vote for her, she's a Marine, she's touched a gun before and have an issue. Like, that's a cop out. That's not, I don't think that's real. And I would really challenge, I would get very curious with those nice white progressives and really get down to some questions on, like, and to really understand that a little further. That's my
I
take.
Yes, and I will leave it at that for the most part. I would just say those folks need to do their homework for themselves. And that being in solidarity with listen, I think and I wrote this in the profile I wrote 5 years ago. The whole she's a cop thing is reductive as hell, and it doesn't serve anybody because it doesn't encourage curiosity. It doesn't encourage an actual thorough examination of her record. You should be looking into her record. You should be reading all you can about her and make up your own mind.
Also, if I may interject here,
Yes.
uh, Trump is the candidate that is embraced by cops. So if you're actually concerned with not supporting the cops, maybe don't hand the election to the person the cops actually adore. But on a more serious level, the way you talk to nice white progressives who need persuasion is the way you talk to anyone who needs persuasion is yes, get curious and try and figure out the values underneath that. What's going on underneath that? And if there's a place where you can connect across values and then say, I agree with you. I share your values about, like fuck the police. And that's why, and really help that person feel listened to. People are so much more receptive to whatever you have to say to them once they feel actually listened to with curiosity. And if
Mhm.
you say, like, yes, fuck the police, and that's why I'm supporting Kamala Harris, and let me explain that to you. But
Exactly.
after you've really helped them feel listened to, and it's gonna gall you, but you have to find a place of actual curiosity and connect with people on a human level to move them when they're stuck in that place. I totally agree with Candace. There's something else under there.
Mhm.
There's another question here. One, this person wants to pitch you, Jamil, Alexandria. So if you can put info about that in the chat, that'd be
And
great.
I have the pitching link right here, Alexandria. Thank you very much for asking.
And
Um,
then
pitch
curious
us
to know
you can
more
get link.
about your perspective on the role of media to dismantle misogynoir. What does that look like?
Ooh. Well, I think, first of all, we can't, as journalists, be trapped in notions of quote unquote objectivity that were formed in times when we were not giving women their proper due. We were not giving people of color their proper due. Think about the in news business, the genesis of the news business. To a large degree, we were not involved. These standards, of objectivity, we're looking down from whichever ivory tower that we're looking down from, in the fourth estate. We can't rely upon those standards to help serve us. They were not built to serve us. They were not built to tell our stories. And we need to make sure that we have standards that help us express ourselves as best as we can. Now, that does not mean you have to be an opinion writer. It's great if you can write an op-ed. We love folks who can express themselves in that fashion, and I certainly love being a columnist. But I don't want folks thinking that that's the only way in the press how people can express themselves. We can be tailoring coverage so that we are not entertaining nonsense, so that we are helping people better understand. Hey, you've just seen a piece of news. Let's try to just dig into that. Let's try to decipher that. And there are outlets that do this. Mother Jones does this. Vox does this. The Nation, Salon. There are a lot of outlets out here who are taking a critical look at the news. A new one in Texas, my friend just launched, the Barbed Wire. These are outlets largely independent, mind you, that help people understand the news in a better way, and don't just wrap it up in flashy prose and in flowery graphics and all these different things. That stuff is nice. I won't diss particular magazines for looking nice. What I'm trying to say is, like, if you are telling the best, find the ones that are telling the best stories and telling the stories that are going to help you understand the news in a way that's actually useful. Yes. And oh, yes. And yes, thank you, Jacqueline. Bolts is terrific. I love Bolts. Another one is Hammer and Hope. There's so many outlets out here
Yeah.
that you may
The
or may not have heard
19th,
of.
the 19th is
The
great.
19th, phenomenal,
Wire.
phenomenal. And I definitely want, like, the thing I would say, if I'm discouraged by anything tonight, and I'm not discouraged by much, because I think this has been a wonderful conversation. But we need more men in the room. We need more men in the room learning about what misogynoir is, how they may be perpetrating misogynoir themselves, and how they enable folks who want to spread this kind of information, and kind of, in this kind of, I would say, social illness, this sickness.
I'd
And
love to, yeah, I'd love to wrap up. I agree with you. I don't know how to do that, Jamil. So if you have thoughts about how to get more men in the room,
frankly, we men have to do a better job of that. We men have
yeah,
to do a better job bringing men into circles like this, and I'm dedicated to making sure that happens.
amazing. So I'd love to hear you both wrap up by talking about the end goal stakes here, because this isn't just about representation, although representation, hashtag representation matters. It's true. But so for example, what we talk about at Educate Us is we see in our research consistently that people of color are 14 points more likely to be supportive and ready to take action for sex ed than white people are. That's an issue we are thinking about a lot here in multiple levels. But what it means is when white people are dominating school boards, as they disproportionately to the electorate are, there's less support for sex ed on those school boards. Like, and that's part of what we're up against here. So I'd love to hear from you, like, what's at stake if we let's set the presidential aside if we can for the last minutes because we've talked about it a lot. What's at stake up and down the ballot for whether we or not we manage to elect Black women, or more Black women in proportion to the number of Black women in the country should be represented in the government? What are we missing out on when we're not doing that, or what great things could happen if we did?
Yeah, for me, I think that it's just been seen that like you said, our support for, and when I say our Black women's support for not just even sex ed, but I mean, I think a lot of the issues that have plagued our schools right now and the more municipal government are things that Black women would have put a stop to from the moment it came across the desk. I mean, you don't want to teach accurate history? Run that by a school board full of Black women. That's not going to fly. You don't want to teach these children about their bodies and run that by a school board full of African American women. It's not going to fly. I think that for lack of I don't want to sound like, I mean, I'm a Black woman, so I am preference. I mean, I believe we're amazing. So, but I don't want to make it seem like we are, the saviors of the world. But at the end of the day, there are so many aspects of, we know what it's like. Here, I'll put it like this. We know what it's like to be oppressed on so many levels, from the patriarchy to racism. Don't add into the mix, I mean, body shaming. Gosh, don't add in anything dealing with, of, I mean, the list can go on and on. We know what it feels like. And so we don't want to see that happen to anyone else. And I believe that's why we stand up when it comes to every movement. We are expected. It's not even a question. Like, it's not even like, can you come to our movement? We're expected, to the point where you can go on TikTok, Instagram, with people, normally white women progressives, pissed off at us because we didn't show up. And it's getting to the point where we're tired. But at the end of the day, when the nitty hits the gritty, we're there. We've historically always shown up. We fought for the right to vote before we could actually use it. We were there, we're doing it, and we've been doing it, and we will continue to do it. And electing us, putting us in seats, we're going to defend not just people that look like us, but every person that we know, because ultimately we're the mothers of the world. I think we feel that innately. We are the mothers of the world. And I think people know that about us. They can trust us. We just gotta get out. We gotta show them. We gotta be trusted. We gotta be believed, I would say.
I hate to add any kind of note after that wonderful conclusion, but just very briefly, listen, since Roe versus Wade was overturned in 2022 by this conservative Supreme Court, 7 states have voted to certify or, put abortion rights into their constitution. And all 7 states they've seen that on the ballot. They've all approved it. We've got 10 states that are going to be voting on abortion this year. If you want to combat misogynoir, find folks. If you're not in one of those states, find those people that you know who are, or find ways to get those folks to understand the importance of those amendments. Because frankly, we're not going to be able to defend ourselves entirely from Donald Trump were he to be elected again. But this is part of the defense plan. You have to considering how much this issue affects and touches the lives of Black women, to me, that should be one of your top priorities.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight, and a special thank you to Jamil Smith, Editor-in-Chief at the Emancipator, and the incomparable Candace Hartnett, our lead organizer here at Educate Us. We will be sending out the video of this as soon as we have it processed, so that you can share it. That's something you can do to your nice white progressives or whoever else is in your circles. And we'll try and send out a reading list of some of the folks we mentioned in this room, and I'll ask Jamil and Candace to send me some thoughts so that when we send out the video, I'll send out a little reading list as well. But yeah, the most important thing you can do is connect with the people in your life. Try and understand where they're coming from, make them feel listened to, and then come in with the persuasion. And also, as Candace said, like, hold our institutions accountable. And then Jamil said as well. Sorry, I'm coming in as the white lady summarizing what everybody said, but sometimes you have to hear it from me, so I'll just repeat what they said. Have a good night, everybody. We really appreciate you being here. We'll see you out there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.